I've been informed that a mostly flying army is a bad idea, so let's give them some stealth. Roll the music. Hello and welcome back to yet another Scuffed Hammer video. This video is part 3 of my Tyranid 2k in 1 year challenge. I'll be painting up some Venomthropes. I'll be running them as 2 squads of 3 rather than as 1 squad of 6. But I'll be painting them all up in one go so I can knock it out of the way and don't have to come back to it. Now this video is a bit different because I bought the models brand new. And if you've been following along so far, you'll know that I'm trying to save as much money as possible, so why would I go out of my way and buy brand new models? Well, when looking for list ideas, I came across a post on Reddit. Reddit, I know. But the post said that I could take 1 box of miniatures and make 6 models out of it. Combine this with the fact that I have not seen a single Venomthrope for sale anywhere, and I don't think I've ever seen a Venomthrope painted up outside of YouTube videos. I thought that this would be the perfect way to get them as cheaply as possible. Because not only am I getting the 21% discount from my local hobby distributor, I'm also then splitting that cost in half by building 2 different types of units instead of just 1. Now this post that I came across said that the tendrils that the Venomthropes have can be used to stand the models up so that they don't need the big chunky tail. And after reading some of the lore for them, I felt like it made perfect sense. These guys are just big balls of gas and smoke and spew spores out into the air to make it a biohazard to just be near them on the battlefield. So why not make them look like big balls of gas rather than these weird mutated warp creatures with just a different face? Building these guys ended up being a lot of fun, just angling their tendrils in different ways so that they would look different when sitting on their bases. And talking of bases, it's time to make them. I'm keeping this consistent with the rest of the army I've done so far, so if you want a more in-depth explanation of that, head over to the first video in the series. But the quick breakdown is a bit of volcanic texture paint and a bunch of rocks that are then locked down tight with some super glue. Now, there's a bit of dead space in the video here, so
this is where I'd put it.
Sponsor!
If I had one!
But I don't. So instead, I'm gonna dub this the brain break. Take a break from the constant bombardment of social media and just chill out to some music while I continue to make these bases. Okay, so the brain break's over. And this is my solution to fixing the giant gaping hole that is in the stomach of these Venomthropes where their tail should be. Air dry clay. This entire tub costs less than a thing of green stuff. Plus, if you find that it's starting to dry out in the tub, you can use it for other projects. And if you have kids, it's perfect for them to play with. I start by rolling it into a vaguely cylindrical shape and then squish it into the empty space that is left. I then use the end of my paintbrushes and even the flat of my hobby knife to push and pull and make sure that it sits exactly where I want it to sit. Now, this took a lot of practice, but by the time that I got to my last model, I had the process down pat. Now, it doesn't look perfect, and that's just because I have 0 sculpting skills. I'm sure it would look as rough as it does if I'd used milliput or green stuff, or whatever else they try to sell you to do sculpting stuff with. But as a first time thing, the first time ever sculpting with any type of material, I think it went down pretty well, and it gets across the vibe of them just being a big ball of gas that's slowly moving their way across the battlefield, lashing their tendrils out at anybody that dares to get close. The only downside is that I had to wait about 24 hours before I could paint over the top of it, which I then promptly proceeded to do with my airbrush and base coat. And as always, any base coat is fine, do whatever works best for you. On a side note, I recently learnt that my airbrush is designed specifically only for inks, and that is why it has been such a pain to get anything done. And what you don't see in this part of the video is that I have to stop every 20 seconds because my airbrush clogs up all the time. So now I know why it does that, and I can have a much better experience moving forward. Anyway, I decided that I wanted some smoke coming out of their backs because I couldn't use the little smoke stacks on them as pieces because I will need them for the zoanthropes. So I decided to pull apart some cotton wool balls and just spray paint them purple. I would have added some more detail to it, but at this point, as the previously mentioned clogging issues, I was beyond frustrated and needed to just walk away and take a break. But I still think it ended up pretty good as is. Now that everything's base coated, it's time to move on to painting the bases. Starting with a dabbing of Skavenblight Dinge, I use a rough brush and make sure to get a healthy dose all over it. Then with some Mechanicus Standard Grey, I do a heavy dry brush, but not too heavy. Then moving on to Brain Matter Beige, I do a light dry brush, making sure to let a lot of the grey shine through and that the white is just the peaks of the rocks. Now it's time for my favourite part of this painting scheme, flicking on a bunch of paint with an old toothbrush. I am so glad that this is the only technique that really works because it is so much fun. And the pattern looks just like stars. It's perfect. I could not ask for a more fun process for a more perfect result. And of course, I'm doing this with Wraithbone just because a pure white is too bright. Moving on to the skin, I get out the Black Templar contrast paint and start picking out the big balls of straining gas that's on his back. Taking care to not spill over onto the armor, otherwise I'll have to redo the whole process all over again. And this was a bit more difficult than you'd think because the balls of gas and the armor blend in together in quite a few spaces, and it was really difficult to tell where the armor started and the balls ended. I then moved on to painting its neck, face, and face tentacles alongside the big stomach that I made for it using air dry clay. After that, I picked out the tentacles and made sure I got all of the little tendrils except for the spikes on the end because I wanted to keep that as part of the armor. Then I needed to go back over a spot that I missed, which is a gap between the armor and the arm that just looks like a bundle of tendons and nerves that is perfect for this color. Next step was the eyes. I loaded my brush up with white ink and very lightly tapped the spot that I wanted the ink to pool. The ink then ran off my brush and straight into the eye socket and sat there perfectly. I then replicated the exact same technique with my yellow speed paint, meaning the eyes were done in 2 steps. Painting with the Drukai Violet this time was much easier than on the Termagants and Hormagaunts. This time I had a big open space to work with that I didn't have to go and pick out tiny little bits 20 times on 40 different models. I started by doing the big bag of gas on its back, making sure to get the spot where the gas was going to come out, then doing the gas on its stomach, and I also decided to do the tentacles on its face as well, because it looks like the kind of thing that would be wet and icky from whatever they're secreting from their skin. Of course, there was the odd bit of muscle fiber poking through the tentacles, but that was nowhere near as difficult as the previous video. This part was a lot of fun, and the desired effect of having this almost glossy wet sheen to their skin worked perfectly. Before continuing on, I decided the best thing to do would be to glue them down now, so I had something a little bit more solid to hold when doing the finishing touches and placing the smoke on their smokestacks. Some of these models were pretty delicate, but they all managed to stick up there. To add a little bit of layer and depth to the big sack of gas on its back, I thinned down some Nagaroth Night a lot, to the consistency of almost a shade. I then applied it pretty liberally all over the cracks on the back, making sure it really got into the crevices and provided a bit of distinct difference to the sameness of the area. Once that was done, it was time to glue on the smokestacks. This was a really fun process. There was space for 6 lots of smoke per model, and the effect worked really well. For the most part, I was able to put a single dab of super glue on the spot that the smoke was coming out of, but for a few of them that were just a bit more pulled apart than others, I had to put a little dab on the inside and stick it to the top of the bag of gas. The only change I would make is to pass over the top of it with an ink to give it a bit more depth. But with that, it's about time for the final reveal. Well, this just about wraps up the video. I loved doing such a simple, easy, and cheap kit bash that anybody could do at home from stuff that's quite cheap and you can get at most art supply stores. Now, I know they might not be the best models. I mean, they only give models stealth, which is only effective to 12 inches, which isn't great, but I just love the look of them and I am so keen to put these on the table. So that just leaves us with one last thing. How much did these models cost, and what's the percentage at? So, for 2 boxes of Zoan/Venomthropes, I paid $165.12. Now, if I was to buy just those 2 boxes for the Venomthropes and not use the spare parts for the Zoanthropes, I would have paid $220 for the 6 models. So, splitting the cost that I actually paid in half, because the other half will go for the Zoanthropes, I paid $82.56 for the 6 Venomthropes, for a grand total of $253, or 44% of what GW would have had me pay at $573. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and drop a comment down below. It really helps with the algorithm. I've been watching the numbers go up ever so slightly the more people interact. But with that, it's time to say goodbye. See you in the next one.